The return trap is not just that they come back. The real trap is what happens inside your body when they come back. The silence breaks. The waiting ends. The unknown stops pressing on your chest for a moment. The person who felt gone suddenly becomes available again, and your nervous system feels the drop. Relief floods in so fast that it can feel like safety. The pain softens. The anger loses its edge. The questions become less urgent. The part of you that was bracing for abandonment finally gets air. And because that relief feels so good, your brain starts doing something dangerous. It starts rewriting the emotional memory of what happened. You remember the warmth faster than you remember the damage. You remember the message faster than you remember the silence. You remember their voice faster than you remember the nights you spent trying to understand why they disappeared emotionally. You remember the reunion faster than you remember the version of yourself that was falling apart before they came back. That is the return trap. They come back, and suddenly your body wants to forget what it had to survive while they were gone. Not because you are weak, not because you have no self-respect, not because the pain was fake. You forget because the fear finally stopped screaming. And when fear stops screaming, relief can feel like proof. It can feel like, maybe it was not that bad. Maybe I overreacted. Maybe they do care. Maybe this means something changed. But relief is not repair. A return is not the same as accountability. Warmth is not the same as change. Someone coming back does not automatically mean they came back with the ability to stay differently. If this kind of clarity helps your nervous system settle, subscribe. PsychBond is a daily decoder for psychology, relationships, and avoidant and anxious attachment patterns, so you stop guessing. Now, let us name the mechanism clearly. When someone pulls away, ghosts, goes cold, withholds clarity, disappears emotionally, or leaves you in uncertainty, your nervous system does not always process that as a normal relationship problem. Especially if you carry anxious attachment, it can feel like threat. The body starts scanning. What changed? Did I do something wrong? Are they done? Are they with someone else? Did I imagine the connection? Are they testing me? Should I reach out? Should I wait? Should I act calm? Should I disappear too? The brain wants a rule because unpredictability is expensive. Uncertainty takes energy. It keeps the body alert. You may still function, work, talk, eat, smile, and answer messages, but under the surface, one part of you is still listening for the return. That is why their silence can take up so much space. It is not just the absence of a message, it is the absence of emotional ground. When the person finally comes back, your body receives more than contact. It receives an end to the threat state. That is why the return can feel so powerful. The nervous system does not say, "Let me evaluate whether this person has changed." It says, "The danger stopped." That is the first reason relief makes you forget. The body prioritizes the end of panic over the memory of why the panic began. If you were drowning and someone pulled you out of the water, the first sensation would not be a careful review of how you got thrown in. The first sensation would be air. That is what the return can feel like. Air. And when you finally get air, it is very hard to stay focused on the fact that the same person may have been part of why you could not breathe. This is where people blame themselves. They say, Why do I melt the second they come back? Why do I forget everything I promised myself? Why do I become soft again? The answer is not that you are stupid. The answer is that relief is a nervous system event before it is a logical decision. Your mind may know the pattern. Your Notes app may know the pattern. Your friends may know the pattern. But when the person returns, your body experiences the return before your standards have time to speak. That is why you can be very clear during the silence and very confused during the reunion. During the silence, the pain is obvious. You remember everything. You remember the inconsistency. You remember the unanswered questions. You remember how small you felt. You remember how long you waited. You remember saying, "Never again." But when they return warm, the emotional weather changes. The threat drops. The attachment system softens. The brain starts searching for connection again. Suddenly, the same facts feel less sharp. This is the second reason the return trap works. Pain is easier to remember when the wound is open. Once the person comes back and puts warmth over the wound, the body can mistake the cover for healing. That is why you may minimize. You may think, maybe they were just overwhelmed. Maybe they needed time. Maybe I was too sensitive. Maybe I should not make this a big deal now that things feel okay. Notice that phrase, now that things feel okay. Feeling okay after panic is not the same as being safe. Sometimes it only means the nervous system got the contact it was starving for. The return creates contrast. The colder they were, the warmer their return feels. The longer the silence, the more powerful the message. The more abandoned you felt, the more intoxicating the attention becomes. That contrast can create emotional amnesia. You do not forget because nothing happened. You forget because the return becomes so intense that it temporarily outshines the absence. This is why intermittent patterns can become so addictive. If someone is consistently loving, the nervous system learns steadiness. But if someone is inconsistent, the return becomes a high. The warmth does not feel normal. It feels like rescue. The message does not feel like communication. It feels like proof that you were not erased. The hug does not feel like affection. It feels like the end of exile. And when love starts feeling like rescue from the same pain the pattern created, the bond becomes confusing. You are not only attached to the person, you become attached to the relief of their return. This is why you may remember their good moments so vividly. The nervous system marks relief as important. It says, "This is the thing that stopped the pain." So the warm version of them becomes emotionally louder than the damaging pattern. You remember how they looked at you. You remember the apology, even if it was incomplete. You remember the joke, the softness, the "I missed you," the little sign that they still care. And those moments can become evidence in your mind. But here is the hard truth. A return can be emotionally real and still not be relationally safe. They may genuinely miss you. They may genuinely feel something. They may genuinely want the comfort of reconnection. But missing you is not the same as understanding what they put your body through. Wanting you back is not the same as having the ability to repair. Feeling relief when they reconnect is not the same as proof that the pattern changed. That is why the return trap is so dangerous. It uses real feeling to distract you from missing structure. It gives you enough warmth to forget that you still do not have enough consistency. It gives you enough contact to soften the memory of being left in uncertainty. It gives you enough hope to postpone the questions that would reveal whether anything is actually different. Another reason relief makes you forget is that the brain wants emotional closure more than it wants accuracy in the moment. When someone returns, your mind may rush to create a story that makes the pain make sense. They came back because they care. They were distant because they were scared. They did not mean to hurt me. They just needed space. Some of that may be true, but a soothing story is not the same as a complete story. Anxious attachment, especially, can turn a return into an answer before the person has actually answered anything. They text, and your body says, "See, it was not over." They act warm, and your body says, "See, they do care." They show up, and your body says, "See, I was not crazy." But those answers may only answer one question. Are they still emotionally connected in some way? They do not answer the deeper questions. Can they be consistent? Can they explain what happened? Can they tolerate your hurt without making you comfort them? Can they repair the rupture? Can they change the pattern after the relief fades? Can they come back with capacity, not just longing? That is the difference most people miss. The return answers the fear of being forgotten. It does not automatically answer the need for safety. And if you confuse those two, you will keep restarting the same cycle. You will think the return is the repair. You will think the warmth is the accountability. You will think the reunion is the change. But sometimes, the return is only a reset. A reset means the emotional pain drops for a while, but the pattern stays alive underneath. A repair means the person understands what happened, takes responsibility, and behaves differently when the same trigger returns. That is the difference. A reset says, "We feel close again." Repair says, "We are not going to repeat the same wound in the same way." The return trap happens when your body is so relieved by the reset that you stop requiring repair. This can be especially intense after no contact, a breakup, a ghosting period, or an avoidant withdrawal. During the distance, you may build a strong inner case. You may list what hurt you. You may finally see the pattern. You may tell yourself, "If they come back, I will not forget this time. I will ask the hard questions. I will watch their actions. I will not fall for warmth without change." And then they come back. Maybe they are soft. Maybe they are funny. Maybe they sound lonely. Maybe they say the thing you have been waiting to hear. Maybe they do not even say much, but their presence itself hits the place in you that missed them. Suddenly, the strong inner case starts weakening. Not because the case was wrong, because the part of you that built the case was trying to protect you during absence, and the part of you meeting their return is trying to restore the bond. Those are different states. The protective self remembers the pain. The relieved self wants the connection back. The return trap is the moment the relieved self takes over, before the protective self has finished reading the evidence. That is why it helps to understand state-dependent memory. You do not remember every truth with the same intensity in every emotional state. When you are hurt, the hurt is vivid. When you are relieved, the relief is vivid. When you are lonely, the longing is vivid. When they are warm, hope becomes vivid. This does not mean any one state is the whole truth. It means you need to stop letting the most recent emotional state become the judge of the entire relationship. If they are gone, you may only remember the pain. If they return, you may only remember the bond. The truth is usually in the pattern across both states. What happens when they are close? What happens when they feel pressure? What happens after you ask for clarity? What happens after conflict? What happens after they get what they wanted from the reunion? What happens when your nervous system is no longer just grateful that they came back? That is where the real information lives. Another reason the return makes you forget is that it gives you identity relief. During the silence, you may feel rejected, unwanted, replaceable, foolish, abandoned, or ashamed. Their return can temporarily reverse all of that. Suddenly, you feel chosen again, desired again, important again. Maybe not fully secure, but less humiliated. That identity shift can be addictive. It is not only, I got them back. It is, maybe I was not nothing. That is powerful. When someone's return gives you relief from feeling unworthy, your brain may protect the return at all costs. It may minimize the pain because the return is now carrying your self-worth. This is where the trap deepens. If their return is the thing that proves you mattered, then questioning the return can feel like risking that proof. You may avoid asking for accountability because you are afraid the warmth will vanish. You may avoid naming the damage because you are afraid it will break the reunion. You may accept a shallow apology because pressing deeper might turn them cold. You may tell yourself, I do not want to ruin this. But what exactly are you protecting? A repaired bond or a fragile moment of relief? This is the question that matters. Because if the relationship can only survive when you forget the pain, then it is not healed. It is being protected by your silence. If their return only works when you do not ask what changed, then it is not safety. It is a pause in the cycle. The return trap also works because the body prefers familiar pain over unfamiliar grief. Staying in the cycle hurts, but it is a hurt your nervous system knows. Letting the person return lets you avoid the bigger grief of accepting that they may not have the capacity to love you safely. That grief is enormous. It asks you to stop negotiating with potential. It asks you to stop living on signs. It asks you to admit that someone can feel deeply and still not be able to show up consistently. That truth can feel unbearable. So the return becomes a way to delay it. When they come back, you do not have to grieve yet. You can hope again. You can breathe again. You can imagine that maybe this time is different. And sometimes it is different. People can grow. People can repair. People can come back with humility, capacity, and change. But the return itself does not prove that. The return only proves that they returned. Another reason the return trap works is because the return gives you temporary relief from self-doubt. During the distance, you are not only missing them, you are questioning yourself. You wonder if you imagined the connection. You wonder if you were too much. You wonder if your feelings were embarrassing. You wonder if the whole thing meant more to you than it meant to them. That kind of self-doubt is brutal, because it does not only make you miss the person, it makes you lose trust in your own perception. Then they come back, and suddenly your perception feels validated. You think, I knew there was something here. I knew I was not crazy. I knew they felt it too. And that part may be true, but validation is not the same as repair. Their return may prove that the bond still has emotional charge, but it does not prove that the bond has become safer. This is where many people get pulled back in. The return does not only soothe the abandonment wound, it soothes the humiliation of feeling like you cared alone. So instead of asking, "Can this person show up differently?" the nervous system clings to, "At least I was not imagining it." But being right about the connection does not mean the connection is right for your body. Something can be real and still repeat the same injury. There is another piece of this that is hard to admit. Sometimes the return trap feels safer than your own boundary. A boundary can feel clean in your mind when the person is absent. You can tell yourself, "I am done. I know what I deserve. I will not let this happen again." But when they come back, the boundary has to become real. Now you may have to risk disappointing them. You may have to risk losing the warmth. You may have to risk seeing whether they can meet a standard instead of only enjoying your softness. That is where many people collapse. Not because they do not have standards, but because enforcing a standard at the exact moment relief arrives can feel like rejecting the thing their body has been desperate for. So the nervous system whispers, "Not now. We can talk about it later. Let us just enjoy this. Let us not ruin the moment." And that is how the trap resets. Later becomes never. Because once the closeness is back, the fear of losing it returns too. This is why the return has to be slowed down. You do not have to reject the person immediately. You do not have to become cold. But you do have to stop letting the first wave of relief make all the decisions. Relief is allowed to be felt, but it is not qualified to lead. This is where you need the capacity check. Not to punish them, not to become cold, not to play games. The capacity check is how you stop letting relief make the decision for you. It asks a very simple question. Did they come back with the ability to hold what happened, or did they only come back with the desire to feel close again? Those are not the same. Someone can miss you and still not be able to face you. Someone can want access to you and still avoid accountability. Someone can feel lonely and still not be ready to repair. Someone can say, "I missed you," and still become defensive the moment you say, "That hurt me." The first capacity check begins here. Can they name what happened without minimizing it? If they come back and act like nothing happened, that tells you something. If they make the whole thing about how hard it was for them, that tells you something. If they rush you into warmth before they acknowledge the rupture, that tells you something. Capacity sounds like, "I know I pulled away. I know that affected you. I do not want to pretend it did not happen." Capacity does not need you to erase the pain so the reunion can feel comfortable. The second capacity check. Can they tolerate the impact of their behavior without making you feel guilty for having been hurt? This is huge. Some people return because they miss the bond, but they cannot handle the mirror. The moment you say, "I was hurt," they say, "So I am the bad person now?" Or, "I cannot do anything right," or, "Why are you bringing this up when things are finally good?" That is not capacity. That is emotional escape. Capacity can hear the impact without collapsing into shame or turning the conversation back onto you. The third capacity check. Do they repair with behavior, not just emotion? A warm return can feel convincing, but the pattern reveals the truth. Do they communicate more clearly after coming back? Do they follow through? Do they make the relationship less confusing? Do they show consistency when the relief fades? Do they become more honest when pressure returns? Or do they repeat the same withdrawal? This is where many returns fail. They feel beautiful at the beginning because relief is high. But once the bond settles, the old pattern comes back. That means the return was emotional, not structural. The fourth capacity check. Can they talk about what will be different next time? Not in vague promises, not "I will try," not "let's just be positive." Real repair needs a plan. If silence was the wound, what will they do differently when overwhelmed? If inconsistency was the wound, what changes in communication? If avoidance was the wound, can they name when they are deactivating instead of disappearing? If emotional intensity was the wound, can both people slow down without abandoning the issue? The point is not perfection. The point is evidence of capacity. The fifth capacity check is the hardest. Do you become more yourself after their return, or do you start performing again? Watch your body. Do you feel clearer after they return, or only relieved? Do you feel safe enough to speak honestly, or do you start editing yourself so they do not leave again? Do you feel the relationship expanding, or do you feel yourself shrinking to protect the reunion? Your body will often know whether the return is repair or only relief. Relief says, "They are back, do not ruin it." Safety says, "They are back, and we can tell the truth now." That is the difference. A return with capacity creates more truth. A return without capacity requires more forgetting. There is one more capacity check that matters. What happens when the return stops feeling exciting? At first, both people may be softer because the reunion has emotional momentum. There is relief, longing, maybe guilt, maybe tenderness. But real capacity shows up after the high fades. When routine returns, when a hard conversation comes back, when the avoidant person feels pressure again, when the anxious person needs reassurance again, when the relationship has to become more than a beautiful reunion scene. Does the person keep showing up then? Do they still care when the emotional reward is lower and the responsibility is higher? Do they stay honest when the old defense wants to return? That is where the truth becomes visible. The return is the doorway. The pattern after the return is the evidence. This is why the title matters. The return trap is not always about the person returning with bad intentions. Sometimes they return with real longing, real emotion, real softness. But if they do not return with capacity, your nervous system may still turn their return into a rescue. You will forget the pain because forgetting protects the reunion. You will silence the questions because questions might threaten the closeness. You will call relief peace because peace is what you have been desperate to feel. But peace that depends on forgetting is not peace. It is a temporary break from panic. The small practical truth is this. When they come back, do not make your first question, "Do they still want me?" Make your first question, "Can this return hold the truth? Can it hold what happened? Can it hold your hurt? Can it hold their accountability? Can it hold a different pattern? Can it hold consistency after the emotional high fades?" If the answer is yes, there may be something to work with. If the answer is no, then the return may feel good, but it is not yet safe. And you do not have to shame yourself for feeling relief. Relief is human. Missing someone is human. Wanting the pain to stop is human. But you can feel relief without letting relief erase your memory. You can feel softness without surrendering your standards. You can be glad they came back and still ask whether they came back differently. That is how you leave the return trap. Not by becoming cold, not by pretending you do not care, but by refusing to let the best 5 minutes of reunion erase the worst weeks of uncertainty. The return is not the proof. The repair is the proof. If this helped your body feel a little safer, liking this video helps it reach someone else who needs this clarity. Welcome to PsychBond. You're safe here.